You know, loving in stereo has never sounded better. Today we're going to talk about how difficult it is to bring the past into the present, how difficult it is to bring good ideas into the places of problems, how difficult it is for us to communicate at scale. Now, there's this idea that I've heard before. It's called transfer learning. This idea that you can have a good model, a good representation of something, and want so deeply to bring it into the places and where it's needed. Basically, taking your success metrics and evaluations and bringing it to a new place. You know, you have a robot dog walking in a nice laboratory and you bring it to the forest and all of a sudden everything falls apart. How often do we see our world plagued by that sort of bias, that sort of desire to have models in which we know to work for us, generalized to a world in which is oh so different from what we've seen. Now, in this idea, we do simulate a lot of things. We read, we watch, we listen. We try to gain the best insights that we can about a world oh so complex. However, what happens when you try to bring that into the world? We hear this a lot. Fake it until you make it. That's fantastic. That's awesome. There's a pretty big line of truth to that. Try your best in this environment, learn all that you can, and perform to the success metrics in which are brought to you. There's just a problem. Who, what, when, where, why are we defining these damn success metrics? The problem that exists here is that we are trying to build a better world, a world in which we become really, really aware of. We are interconnected to every square inch of our planet, essentially, yet finding that we can only process solutions that really touch our own selves. Now, what is going to be the problem with that? I really want us to think about that. A world in which has endless solutions, seemingly, in a world that has endless problems. Why do we still today find, like a good author says in a sort of different way, why are the solutions where the problems are not, and the problems where the solutions are not? How do we wish to capture that? How do we wish to really respect the fact that we are starting to map every square inch, connect every square inch, try to build a granularity at that scale while our systems still fail? We find ourselves failing to transfer oh so often. Are our laboratories empty, devoid of any context of what's going on? Are our spaces, are our hearts not found in the right place? I would love to say that everybody's trying to fix themselves to sort of a marionette dance of what they need in their world, doing exactly what fits for them in a way that can just barely coherently connect to a world of problems in which reach them. How are you brought to the forefront of actually giving a fuck, right? So I am questioning how we want to challenge that, how to do it, right? This idea that we have something so successful and move it to other places, either not prepared, not expecting, or simply not properly fueled for these solutions, finding it so difficult to connect themselves. We start to see people fail to have imagination. We see people fail to figure out a path out. And what I wonder is, there is no shortage of success. There's no shortage of people that want so deeply to make changes in this world, yet our imaginations are thieved from us. Why is that? Why do we feel like that? Why is it that that is such a common theme? If we are to believe that these interconnected systems are as important as we see them to be, we need to ask ourselves how we move forward towards a solution. From these big ideas, I think it's only obvious that we need to have some way to pay attention to a lot of what we're saying and not have it be indifferent to our greater world. We need to find ways so that the models and that we can understand, we can scope, and we can trust are properly applied to the places in which most need it. We cannot let the problems be so separated from the solutions, and we need our solutions to find ways to be more effective at finding the problems, building imagination for people, and reducing the friction that oh so often stops people from imagining that world better. Though we do need to talk to some more people, so let's figure that out. Let me keep working, and we'll get right back at it. What are things that you enjoy or that you succeed in that you've found harder to access than it should be?
I'd say because I'm trying to access the film industry, and the success like role model I'm looking at is Zendaya, because she was also like, she came here in Oakland and now she's like a famous model, singer, actress, and all this stuff. And I want to also become like within those like careers.
Yeah.
But seeing how it's kind of hard to like break into the film industry because there's like so many other people that are also trying to access the careers.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm just like not like the only one like trying to access that. So
It's hard to mix the dream with the competitive space
Yeah.
as much as it is. And do you see it as a sort of it's good to have idols in our world, but it's difficult to have such easy success stories come out of those idols. And do you wish there's more ways to find that success or easier paths to get involved in that way?
I feel like yeah, there should be like easier paths to go through, but I feel like it shouldn't be too easy because at the end when you reach that goal, you want to feel like you did something and you can like be proud of what you've done and through all like the trials and like the barriers that was keeping you from that. But I don't want it to be like too hard where you're like you just give up and you just don't feel like you'll just end up somewhere else.
Yes. You want to keep the hope and keep the imagination while
Yeah.
still being able to respect how much of your life connects to the icon in your world, or
Yeah.
basically your model.
I guess when thinking about what success is supposed to look like and what everybody sees, one aspect of it is probably friends and social connections and things like that. It's definitely harder for me to make those different connections, but I've tried. Yeah. I feel like I don't got as good of an answer, you know.
So like visions of success often empower us a lot, but they often don't tell the whole story. Are there any times where you've been excited by, like been pretty much inspired to do something and found just a lot of difficulty in trying to repeat that sequence, or you've read a book about someone or you've watched a YouTube video,
Yeah.
but you don't see how you can properly align yourself or at least start coming up with ideas on your own for that?
I know one thing that I've seen successful people do is like dopamine detox, not being on social media, following a strict daily schedule of wake up at 4 a.m., go to the gym, blah, 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 and actually applying that to real life is kind of ridiculous. You know, who does that?
Sure.
I would like it to work, but,
And sort of seeing how, sure, there's this in a lab setting, we would love to take away all of those incentives, distractions, for example, and have that detox. But in our world, to enjoy it with our friends, we need all of these elements which make our lives as enjoyable and as socially cohesive as we
Yes.
expect them to be. So it's sort of trying to live that difficulty while still meeting a goal of success, or at least a
Yeah.
model of success.
I definitely feel like I've missed out on some things, not being on social media, because like I just won't understand some references. I won't be up to date with the latest news or whatever.
In one of my previous videos, a lot of people are talking about just keeping up with things, right? And how exhausting that is, but also how much it's a necessity for some people's lives, but it is at times a privilege to disconnect and enjoy your world how you want to paint it. Today we're talking a bit about transfer learning and how our role models have a big effect on us. What are things that you find a lot of success or that you enjoy that are not as easy to connect with or you find harder to discover in the world?
I'd say, well, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm actually really big into tech, and it's very hard for me to talk about like new tech concepts, for example, like world models. I recently just won a hackathon on making a world model project.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a pretty big difficulty that I've been facing, finding community at my college in Ohio. It's really something I try to find community in, but being from the Midwest, it is pretty difficult.
Do you find it hard? So I'm also from the Midwest. In that same vein, trying to find people to connect with, trying to find personal role models in your life that aren't as distant. Do you find yourself often disconnected from those spaces, or do you find yourself being able to build those spaces, or do you find it dependent on what you're working on?
I think it takes a little bit of effort, definitely, to connect with people, with role models. I just talked to a startup founder, and I'm about to pitch my hackathon project in a few minutes. But I think it definitely takes effort to find those role models. It is difficult, and I think I feel like in my gut it's scary, but I know that whenever I feel scared, it's usually leads to the most amount of progress.
When have you found someone that inspires you, but you failed to connect that to some sort of actually tangible effect?
I guess that happened, like, there's a lot of tech entrepreneurs that post on social media. A lot of the time they're actually very cool, but sometimes it like hurts my gut whenever I meet them, and they're like a totally different person. And I'd say that's definitely a time I faced like a situation like that.
Like public perceiving disingenuous behavior when we're trying to act in the social theater, but when we meet them, we see that they're a bit different, or they're not as much of a champion, but rather just as much as a human as we see.
Yeah.
When you have people trying to, say, really look up to someone and use them as a model, have you had any instances where that model has fallen apart for them? And in the same way in machine learning, we have a robotic dog that's trying to navigate a lab space, but you put them in the forest and they start to stumble and get confused. Do we have any instances where that idea is replicated, but on the case of our social sphere, in the same way, you see that their social theater does not match their actual daily execution, and the fact is there's a disingenuous disconnect there?
I think it just like maybe some don't have experience I think one problem I face a lot on my own is I try to do a certain task and I do a bunch of side quests thinking that I'm doing that certain task, but the only way to do a task is by doing it. And instead of preparing or anxiously waiting or searching on Google how I can find the most optimal solution for it, I think I have faced this issue a lot. There's actually a very nice poem about doing the thing. I believe it's called Doing the Thing. And that's something I like face a lot in my life. I try to find the most optimal solution for something, or try to find the best way to do it. But many times the best way to do it is just by going full force.
Basically, the perfection is the enemy of good enough. Testing your thesis, get it out into the world, have some way to actually see how your world is built better from it. What is something that you care about that you find harder to access than it should be?
What do we care about? The Olympics.
We had to struggle watching the Olympics, but that's not a life-answering question.
Why do you think people are so good at creating solutions, but not always good at getting them to the people who most need them? Why do you think that we have that disconnect? We can think of building good systems, but not being able to expand them outwards, or why do we focus so deeply on success maybe rather than the infrastructure by which it's presented to us?
Well, one thing that strikes me is that you have this high-level lab work and creative work going on, but people that could use it, there's no structure for them, not enough money for put into the delivery system.
Do you think in that delivery system, is it bring this new technology into spaces in which are needing so quickly to meet the world?
Yeah, I don't think you can just hand somebody something without some background, without some teaching. Something evolved out of something, but if you can't just drop it on somebody, if they don't have a background knowledge or don't have the chance to get educated about it, or it doesn't work in their lifestyle.
Yes.
So I think that's like, sometimes that just doesn't work so well because there's no background for it, or there's no
context.
The home maybe doesn't have that same approach or perspective that the creators or the educators would wish.
In a laboratory, we have a model that works just well, but we move it into the real world and we fail to see it generalized. Sure, there isn't a respect for its domain.
You need to know who the receiving party is. You need to really understand who they are and what their background is, and meet them somewhere closer to what would work.
Yes.
What's realistic.
What is something that you find a lot of success in, or that you enjoy, that feels much harder to access than it should be?
I started doing drag recently. It was really hard to get into it at first. I feel like it's so hard to get into your local drag scene, especially when you're underage. Because when I wanted to do drag at first, I was very much still 17 years old. And I was just like, using my wigs and my costumes, because I just have an extensive wardrobe to begin with, in my room, and living the fantasy. But it's not the reality of going and doing it in person. And it's really heartbreaking because I see a lot of queens that are really young online, and drag kings that just don't have access to their local drag community because it's so spread out.
What do you know why it's restricted? Is it
They're passing a lot of new fucked up laws about drag queens and children's and how they don't want them interacting in the same social space. And a lot of drag queens do read it loud. It's not every drag queen's, job, but they very much come in work appropriate attire for that,
Yeah.
They're very mindful with the setting that they're in. They know the role that they have to play.
Have you ever tried to follow someone successful and realize it didn't quite fit your life, or try to have a role model that was sort of pushing an idea that can't exactly work with how you're existing in your space?
I mean, I've seen a lot of goth drag queens that I used to aspire to, because I'm very gothic, even though I'm just very colorfully right now, who just turned out to be really fucked up people. And I really aspire to their aesthetic still. But I'm just I cannot associate with you. In my local scene and on RuPaul's Drag Race. I feel also, another note on RuPaul's Drag Race, a lot of people aspire to that. But it's so commercial now. Because she's not pulling queens off of the local scene. She's getting people who already have designer dresses made by other people. It doesn't come from them anymore. She's banning queens from talking about douching as their Drag Race opening line, but she can talk about coffee enemas, and it's Ru, come on. Queens aspire to go on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I'm that's not always your way. There's so many other ways to be a drag icon. There's pageants.
So the idolization has sort of caused people to get myopic in how they chase.
It's disillusion the hierarchy of that, and it's how everyone gathers in gay bars to watch it, and it's people also gather in those very same bars to watch local queens, and you can get that real life love instead of being on a camera in the film set workroom.
Why do you think we're so good at creating solutions in the world, but not good at bringing them to the places in which they're most needed?
I think community is really hard to find in smaller towns, because the Bay Area is such a bubble. But in Texas, I have queer friends there, and they're I can't access my local community, I'll go to a pride parade and see one person who's my niche aesthetic, but it's so spread out that there's so many gay people in Texas, but there's so little queer spaces. But there's so many, the pressure for alcohol in queer spaces is something that needs to be broken down and talked about, because there needs to be spaces for queer kids outside of their goddamned middle school GSA.
Gotcha. Inclusivity at a degree that actually helps build the community from the ground up, and not just have commercial incentives be the main structure. That
community is good
in.
When you have it and you can find it, but it's hard when it's not local. And even when you're in a thriving community for the gay people, Bay Area, it's still hard because there's so much social status involved and hatred with these people.
Does it create an elitism inside of the culture itself?
There definitely is. Can I give a shout out?
Sure.
Shout out Oakland Secret for doing my first drag show. Shout out Sayla. Shout out Diva Bowie.
Right on.
I love those queens, but I love drag. Support your local community.
So, why exactly do you think we're so good at creating solutions to things, but we find it so difficult in pairing them up to the people that most need it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one thing I think about when I think about this question is we have at least in Western society, a very individualistic society or culture, and we're more focused on finding the solution and yes, I found that or I did that, versus actually genuinely helping people. That we can exploit people and exploit other species as long as we are not individually getting hurt by it. So we love to find solutions and answers, but we don't really care that much about actually helping the people who those solutions would actually help.
We see, oh my God, we forgot so many people. We forgot so
Right.
many factors.
Right.
How do we move from that? How are we led to believe in those sort of myopic solutions by our role models? How are we sort of convinced that these individualistic drives are so virtuous when we definitely recognize, as a human in our society, we need to be worrying about maybe many more things than what we can just file away at?
I think it also comes down to our ego. So we can only have this myopic sort of view because we're afraid of being wrong and then admitting that we're wrong, and that there is another path that might not be what we thought about, but there is another path, there is a solution, there is a way, but our ego is so
Tied to that momentum.
Exactly.
It's like,
So yeah, I don't know if I directly answered
well, that's
that,
exactly what the issue we have to cater with when we ourselves embolden sort of mythic championed actors in our world. Are they making sure they hold the responsibility to be aware of these factors as they are motivating us to do our own individualistic drives? Is there a way to balance that better?
Exactly. I'm not sure if there's a way to balance that better, because truly you can't. The only being you can control is yourself and how you react to certain situations. And I don't believe in the idea, or maybe it is a genuine idea, but I don't subscribe to the idea of having a hero, because any single politician is not the answer. Point blame at one person or one president or one governor. When it feels right to do that, it's comfortable, our ego, oh, at least I'm not that supporter or that supporter of that politician or person, but it's deeper than that. And I think intuitively we can tap into that, but our ego doesn't want us to do that. And then we want to just rely on a quote-unquote hero. And then when they mess up, inevitably, because we all will mess up, we want to blame them instead of looking inwards and seeing, why did I view them on a pedestal?
How many people are also trying and finding successes as they move? And that factor, not championing one person, but understanding they are one pressure valve that we are using to try to release this pain. Inability to walk back and try that other path is something that we see time and time again, a big issue with solving big problems here.
Okay, I think you're touching on the inability to walk back and realize that we were wrong, and that there is another way that we could try, or that someone else has tried and been successful with that. I'm not even sure what successful means, to be honest, but I think one way I personally have tried to do that, and I think I've been quite successful in it, is really realizing that I am a speciesist, and I put human life over any other life, to the point where I have supported the mass, which these terms likely cannot be used definitely because they only apply to humans, but I think they hit hard, contributed and actively paid for and supported and gotten enjoyment from the mass murder, the mass rape, and the mass enslavement of, likely in my lifetime, thousands of animals that I've consumed in one way or another. And you're realizing, am I feeling okay putting another species down just because they're less intelligent than me, just because I have a different looking body than them? And then we translate that into my treatment of other people. Just because someone looks differently than me, or has different views than me, or has a lower intelligence than me, does that mean I can subject them to anything I want? No. And so I think an easy point to start with is looking at your relationship and view on other animals, other species, and I think that's a very tangible way to get into knocking at your ego. And
what are we really upset about, and what are the scaled consequences that are not brought to our doorstep, right? Does that coincide with what you're thinking?
I think exactly, and also looking even deeper than that, why are they not at our doorstep? Because they're purposely hidden from us. Yeah, there's a reason it's not at our doorstep, and the system, this capitalist society, does not want you to see